Hi there. I've had a few queries about getting landlord insurance recently, and it seems to be a requirement for various mortgage providers. And obviously, it's a requirement if you want to be sensible as a landlord. And so I just thought I'd do a walkthrough of this website that I use or I recommend to people, use and recommend. And it's called simplybusiness.co.uk. They're a big insurer. We had an issue with flood insurance for a house fairly recently, and there were all sorts of problems getting insurance on this property. And it was also an issue because it was a foreign national buyer and just all a bit of a palaver. Anyway, the upshot was that I was told about this and I tried it. It worked, and client got their insurance. Happy client. Anyway, right. So the first thing is it's landlord insurance, buy-to-let insurance. We're going to start a quote, and I've already run a quote earlier on this, so I'm pretty comfortable. I'm like, I did my homework on this video basically. And in this case, it's residential because it is, and it's one buy-to-let. And here's a postcode that we've got. It's a terraced house, 2 beds, 2 baths, built between 1900 and 1920, probably, and it's been owned less than a year. Now, one thing I wanted to say is there's a site called propertychecker.co.uk, and it's very good for finding the age of properties. So we see number 12, number 11, number 10. Okay, so these are all different houses here, and let's have a look. So number 12, when was that built? They don't know. Number 11, no, we don't know. Number 10, 1900. So it was probably built 13. Number 9. Generally speaking, based on this style, I would say 1900. So fine, let's put that in 1900 to 1920. And will it be occupied when the policy starts? No, because you got to rent it out. So then they're going to say, will it be occupied within 30 days of policy? Yes. So that's 2 months. So if we assume that you're kind of at the final end of the mortgage application process, then you should be able to get the mortgage funds and rent the property out in that time. Now, it might be that so typically with landlord insurance, you get the insurance when you own the property. But sometimes mortgage insurers want a quote on a property whilst it's going through to completion. So this is the way you can do it. It's very easy and works very well. So anyway, let's say, so I agree it'll be occupied. And who'll be there? Well, they'll be employed. And yes, you're going to do the checks, and here we are going to do all these background checks, and then we've got whoever it is. In this case it's me, and you can see my contact details here, and then you can add that or not. Anyway, let's go to the next step. Now, generally speaking, the sensible thing to do is to get buildings cover, and this would be if there was flooding or whatever. So it's quite an important bit of cover to get, I would say. And in your survey that you will have received, the surveyor will have given a valuation or rebuilding valuation. But typically it's £1,500 multiplied by the square meterage of the property, whatever that is. So in this case, for this house, let's have a quick look. It's 68 meters square, so multiply that by 1500 roughly. It might be more, but that's 102. So therefore, let's say it's 125 to 100. One of the good things is, by the way, you can change all these variables and try different cover variations, which we're going to do in a minute. Okay, so let's say you've got some contents items. So this could be, again, could be there's a flood or something random happens, or fire. Now, flood is actually a really important one, because one of the things that you got to be careful with is tenants getting very annoyed with you. Let's say you want to evict them or whatever. Well, I've seen this in a number of cases in properties we have not sourced, by the way, but in areas where there's a lot of deprivation and so on, and where there's no real social contract between you, the landlord, and the tenant. In other words, the tenant does not want to behave nicely. And in that kind of event, then it's very easy for them just to leave the taps on, or yeah, or just not leave the taps, just leave the taps on, block the sink, and then you've got a flood, and then you've got a problem, and it's very easily done. And then they do that as their parting gift to you as they leave the house. So it's important to have cover. And for whatever sum, I've put this amount here. Now the next thing is accidental damage. I suppose actually, you know what, it's probably a good idea to have accidental damage. Now this could be for minor stuff. I wouldn't try and claim on this often, but what I would be concerned about is the accidental damage where the tenant accidentally left the tap on after they left the house, and the house being empty for 5 days and the place absolutely flooded out. That could be regarded as an accident. Certainly, if the police ever asked, that's what they'll probably say. Oh, it was an accident, sorry. So, you know, with being a landlord, so much of it is about getting good properties, by the way, that attract good high-end tenants that obey the law and want to protect their reputation for the future. Anyway, legal expenses, I think so. I think it's a good idea. Tenant default, this could be very expensive, so I'm not going to include that, but we can play around with the numbers or whatever. I won't do this in this case because what'll happen is you'll be doing this for you, and you can spend some time just tinkering around with the numbers, see how it all works. Excess protection, up to you. £5 million liability. I think this is quite an important thing to have. Classic example is let's say you've got a family. Nice to have a family in the house. And I don't see any pictures here of this, but quite often staircases are quite badly built or have gaps, and babies can squeeze their head through them and they can fall, and just it's that outlier stuff. It doesn't cost a great deal of money to have this cover, but it is important. Emergency cover, well, your lettings manager will be dealing with all of that, so I wouldn't bother. And what is it? Well, it's standard, yes. And it's in good repair, yes. There's no building work, we'll say yes. And there's no subsidence. Now, all of this stuff, the subsidence, that's going to be caught by the surveyor, and you would not be buying a house with subsidence. If you were, you're brave and foolish, in my opinion. With flooding, we would always check about flood risk, because that's a serious problem. We came across this issue recently in Doncaster, in an area, and a house was being sold off cheaply. It was in beautiful condition. Why? Because it had been flooded, and it was impossible to insure for flood risk thereafter. And no, not in low, yeah, so that's fine, no. And no underground workings. Now, this we also check, mining risk we call it, and as long as you're within, as long as you're more than 15 meters of this, you're okay. Also, when you purchase the property, this is all going to be highlighted in the documentation. So anyway, you don't have any of this risk. It's not listed, and it's not partially a flat. So the next thing is what kind of locks? Well, it's got one of these, and here we have windows. Yeah, so you can screw them. You can. So most modern double glazing will have this, or there'll be some kind of window lock or whatever. And if it doesn't have it, get one installed. But modern double glazing will have a lockable window, or windows will be lockable. And it's for residential and more than 45 days, yes. And it's going to be, there's going to be a tendency single tenancy because it's a buy to let. It's not a multiple occupancy property. And yes. So do you rent to? No, I don't, because it's just a single family house, and it'll be under an assured tenancy or whatever. And then you have, yeah. So this you're fine, because generally speaking, clients buy with a UK company, and if you're a UK buyer, you buy with a UK company. You're all good. And financial claims, just I agree to all of these. You've probably never been bankrupt and all of that stuff. Let's get a quote. Now I'm going to do one little thing in a moment where I'm going to show you how this plays out when we, there we go. So there's a quote, £294, and we've got accidental damage, etc., etc., etc. So that's all good. Right, and that's a good quote. Now, I'm just going to go back, and this is the cool part, by the way. You can see, you can change various things here. So let's say we don't want landlord's contents, and or we do want landlords, but we don't want legal expenses, and we just want £2 million cover, and we don't include the accidental damage, and we don't include that. Okay, but we do have buildings cover. Let's see what it does next. So now it'll just, it's saying, okay, don't include accidental cover. Now, one of the things that I've noticed about insurance quotes is that sometimes you opt for less coverage and the quote is more expensive, and you go, and that, one wonders what on earth's going on there. There we go. So that's 186 quid. But for example, if I go back and do one more variation, and then we'll finish at that, and let's say contents, and 15,000, and accidental, include that, and we need some legal. Oh yes, we really do. And I'm just going to try including tenant default. Let's just do this random. Anyway, you got the idea that you can play around with all of this and just tweak variables to work out what quote works for you. And then the final thing, which I'll go into now. So here we go. Now that's interesting, that the tenant excess cover is doesn't cost that much. So previous quote I had was 370. So you got this anyway. So I'm going to just quickly show you this, and then we'll finish up. And just go to details, and here it is. Okay, and you can then go into the policy documents, the summary. This is the one that really matters. I think it's the most helpful one. And then you can see what's covered by your insurance. Now, generally, there's a policy summary, and yeah, so they just tell you you're covered by this, by that, by the other. And different providers will offer slightly different policy summaries. So let's just have a look at this one. And as you see, so you got the outline details. That's good. I prefer, as a general rule, I like looking at policy summaries. So there's some nice Photoshop photo people. And we can see here what you got, what's covered, what's not covered. And that is that. It's all really simple. Now, for clients of ours, the reason I don't do this insurance policy on your behalf, despite trying, is because it's your policy for you. And if I take out the policy on your behalf, I need power of attorney on your behalf, and it gets really messy. And actually, you kind of know what you want to get covered for. And as you've seen, this is a really simple process that you can do from Hong Kong, and therefore you should do it. And as I said, it's a really quick process as well, and it just makes things easy for everyone. There are other insurance people you can use. There are like companies that, like Charles Louis, um, who um, who are brokers, and you could buy insurance through them. You give them a call, and you talk through your insurance requirements, and then they do a search. So that's the other way of doing it. That can work. But I quite like being hands-on. So that's why I use this Simply Business website. All right. Thank you very much.